Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about E6. We're going to touch on the changes that have come up, as well as E8 and how these two documents really do go hand in hand. And we're going to be focusing on the impact on sponsors specifically, so the updates that are most relevant to you. This is me. I've been in the industry for over 25 years. I did start out as a research coordinator. I've been a CRA manager, a lead, a project leader, program leader in early phase development, as well as director of clinical operations in both sponsor and a global CRO. So I will share things from a best practices nature, lessons learned, how I think some of these regulations apply based on feedback from regulatory agencies and based on previous and current audits and inspections. So our objectives today, to introduce rationale, revisions, and release. So some of the very specific items that we need to be aware of. So some really big changes from the way things were to the way things are going, not just in terms of applying technology, but in terms of intent as well. So focus on the intent behind the regulations and the rationale. We'll talk about the changes in the principles themselves, the release of E8, how that is tied together with E6, that these two documents absolutely must be reviewed together. They can't be done or applied in a silo. So everything from study design to the life cycle of an entire program. We'll talk a little bit about critical to quality. This is not a new concept, that's the great news, but it isn't going away in terms of how we're being expected to apply this and to demonstrate evidence that we are. And then we'll talk about just how E8 also provides a reference to how we actually use all of ICH together. So that is our plan for today. So ICH, International Council for Harmonization. So we know that the origins came from the standard to really look at how do we globalize how we do clinical trials. How do we do experimentation on human beings in a way that ensures as much safety as possible of the individuals? So in World War II, experiments were conducted on prisoners. We all know this, it's history. It is part of our foundation for what we do. Things like hypothermia experimentation, dropping acid on people's skin to see if they'd be okay. What happens? Do they heal? Do they get infections? Embedding false shrapnel under people's skin to see, does gangrene set in? What happens if we amputate? What happens if we don't? Removing organs to see if people survive. And when these trials or experiments were questioned, the defense was, well, it was a time of war. We did what we needed to do to expand our knowledge. We were gaining information for our soldiers. These were prisoners. They had no rights. But that basic concept of do no harm, the Hippocratic Oath, seems to have been neglected, seems to have fallen by the wayside. So concept being that we needed to put some guidances in place that we would all adhere to protect vulnerable patients in every situation. So it's the intent of who is vulnerable, whether that is a child, an elderly patient, or an advanced stage cancer patient. Those are vulnerable individuals, whether they're immigrants, whether we're looking at socioeconomic status. We really have to consider, is somebody in a situation to be able to give an informed consent? And that's really a lot of what this comes down to in terms of these applications and these changes. In a world where technology is available almost everywhere we are, and information can be gleaned at the touch of a button, are we using it to the best of our abilities in terms of real-time information, integrity, and also protection of human beings? But then are we also very careful with that piece of protecting our human beings and not allowing that information to be disseminated in ways that could cause harm? So these guidelines, these guidances that we adhere to ensure consistency. We know that if we conduct the study in one country under GCP, we can share that data. The basic rules are the same. The basic outline has been followed. So this all comes from the Declaration of Helsinki. The Declaration of Helsinki was written in response to the World War II crimes, and the latest version is 2024. So from 1964, from the first version, to 2024. So the verbiage, the concepts are still evolving, but the basic idea behind it is the same. So one of the driving principles we're aware of is informed consent. So informed consent obtained if at all possible, and research was allowed without consent where a legally authorized representative was available. So I just highlight just this one concept because it is something we see in ICH in the revision, the first time we actually see the mention of legally authorized representatives. Not necessarily the application of what that means in every country or the specific rules or regulations around that, but this concept being expanded upon. So a lot of verbiage change around informed consent. So we know that if we adhere to ICH, we're being consistent. Again, having conducted audits in Bangladesh, India, Kuala Lumpur, throughout countries in Africa, ICH is globally applied, not just in the nations that formally adopted it, but around the world. So ICH, we know, is also broken into 4 different topics. The one we primarily focus on is efficacy. So this is the one we'll be talking about today. But recognizing that ICH also focuses on quality, safety, and has multidisciplinary topics as well. So when we talk about ICH, again, it really cannot just be one piece of it in a silo. So if you're not familiar with all of these, the ones I emphasize you look at, you read cover to cover. E2, clinical safety, again, gives the great foundation no matter what country we're in terms of why do we report the things we do? How do we escalate these things? What is really critical about reporting in a serious adverse event? What kind of timeline should we look at to ensure everybody has the same information? Then, of course, E6, which we will spend most of our time today, again, cannot be looked at in a silo. So the other ones I recommend you're very, very familiar with. E9, I'll jump to that one, statistical principles. So again, I love this because I'm not a statistician, and it really helps understand why we have to focus on the endpoints in the way we do. Again, how at the end of the day, with our clinical data, we ensure that we actually have consistency. We actually have data that we can analyze. So they're defined up front, but going through E9 just really helped me explain it to my research sites, to talk to my coordinators, to my sub-investigators, my investigators, about why these data points are so critical. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in our industry is that we know all of our research sites do good medicine. That's why we select them. They do excellent patient care. They are experts in their therapeutic area. However, they're not always applying that expertise to a research mindset. And when we start talking about that piece of it, there's sort of a defensive wall, a gap in partnership, I'll say, in terms of what we do and what they do, and frustration with getting queries, or they're delayed entering data, or they resent having monitoring visits come out or monitors come out. So it's really closing that gap in terms of what are the expectations when you do a clinical research trial? How do you set those up front? So E9 has really helped with that in terms of training, communication, and just the understanding of, yes, you do great medicine, but if we don't have the data the way we need it, we can't use it. It's meaningless. And then I want to circle back to E8. So E8, which we will talk about in terms of how does this apply to good clinical practices, E8 is general considerations for clinical studies. General considerations for clinical studies. So the concept here is that we have to focus on the design of our studies. We've known this for years. One size does not fit all. But really thinking outside the box. We're really being encouraged to do that with both of these guidance documents now. So to do things a little bit differently. We know that traditionally getting a trial approved would take anywhere from 7 to 20 years. Or sorry, not a trial, but to get a product to market. To get a product to market, 7 to 20 years. But we also know that during COVID, we got a number of vaccines out and treatments that we're using in under 18 months. So we're still following up on that. We're still running our tests, but in under 18 months. So we really have to think about what lessons did we learn, what did we do differently? We know that before COVID, before 2020, we had a huge push for risk-based management. So when ICH was revised initially in 2016, we had a lot of emphasis around risk-based monitoring. That started in 2013 with our guidance documents in both the US and Europe and Japan. All 3 nations put out a guidance document in 2013. Then in 2016, ICH language in E6 came out around risk-based monitoring. And then in 2020, we actually had to look at how do we do this. If we cannot physically go to the sites, how do we still ensure the integrity of the data? How do we still make sure people are safe? So a lot of it is around that. Again, not the concept of reducing monitoring, but can we anticipate what's go wrong sooner? Can we do more about that? So very practical considerations, and a lot of it, again, comes down to the clinical trial design. So E8 talks a lot about the nuances of trial design. So we'll look at that. We'll look at the table that they provide in terms of if you're trying to do, for example, a pharmacology study, what do you focus on? If you're doing an interventional study, what do you focus on?